I can't tell you how I know. Do with this information what you will. There's going to be a Nintendo Direct next month. It's going to tease a card, Animal Crossing, coming out in 2026.
This Nintendo Direct leak took over the internet. It was shared across Reddit, Twitter, YouTube, all over the gaming news world. But here's the problem. I made it up.
What? Hello friends, welcome back to the channel, but if you're new, hi, hello. I am Artsy over at The Artsy Gamer. I make art, play games, and encourage others to do the same. This is a very different video than I usually feature. Most of it has to do with Animal Crossing stuff. I've been dipping my toes into accessibility, and I usually kind of just stay in my lane with art and making games and just being, hopefully, a positive force on YouTube. But the whole thing with BeatEmUps's and the fake Nintendo Direct leak rumor, whatever, kind of set me off into a really, I don't want to call it a spiral. I don't put a lot of weight on leaks and rumors, but the fact of the matter is the way that he conducted his social experiment really bothered me. And I think it's important to utilize the platform that I have to educate you why we should be upset and how we can deal with this moving forward. When it comes to viral misinformation, when it comes to authority figures, when it comes to confirmation bias and cognitive dissonance and all those psychology things, and also just how to move forward with your humanity intact, but also with a lesson learned when it comes to critical thinking. I put up a copyright disclaimer in the beginning of this video because I will be using Wood's specific social experiment documentary with clips to talk about why this is very frustrating and really upsetting. But I also want to put in a disclaimer that one, I am a person on YouTube that has my own homegrown gluten-free opinions. And while the opinions are my own, they are backed on quite literally a decade of understanding social science. I have a background in conflict analysis and resolution. I have a master's degree in it. A lot of my research and a lot of my work went into understanding behavioral psychology, specifically understanding and hoping to end violent conflict in both interpersonal, local community, and international-based environments. And something that I'll be talking about later is that the fact that the internet is not an environment or it's not real is a false dichotomy. We are in the rise of a digital age that puts more and more clout on influencers and YouTubers. I also don't have 2 million subscribers and no money and resources to make this like a cinematic masterpiece. So you're just going to have to make do with my actual office as a background, Plush's acting as bad actors, and Clip Studio as a whiteboard because I don't have that. So let's talk about the lie.
I can't tell you how I know. Do with this information what you will.
I worded what I said on the podcast very carefully. I didn't say where my information came from. I didn't even say how I knew. I said quite literally, I can't tell you how I know. And I said that on purpose for two reasons. One, I wanted people's imaginations to run wild. I wanted to know how the media would interpret that if it did go viral. And two, I was lying.
So if you were new to this drama, the TLDR is that a very popular gaming YouTuber, BeatEmUps's, with over 2 million subscribers in the month of June, had released a rumor or a leak that there was going to be a Nintendo Direct at the end of July. The heavy-hitting games that BeatEmUps's had listed were Metaphor, Refantasio, I can't even pronounce that, GameCube Shadow Drop, Pokemon Colosseum, Death Stranding, Director's Cut, Witcher 3, Metroid Prime 4, and the Isabelle teaser for Animal Crossing. I say this again, as a disclaimer, that I am not an avid watcher of BeatEmUps's. His content is something that is not my usual sphere for preference when it comes to watching gaming content. And that's nothing to say about the quality of what he does, okay? So I'm not trying to throw shade. It's not what I prefer. I know him through other people. I know him on his podcast where he's had other content creators like List the Last, but I don't really know who he is. And what happened is, people that I do watch and I do know, like Nintendo Prime, Switch Force, Nintentalk, went with it because it was a rumor and it spread like wildfire. And I want to provide a little bit of nuance with this because on one hand, in the very back end of this social experiment, there is some merit to talking about citing your sources. There is merit about following up. From the social scientist perspective of running an experiment, everything that he did for this experiment was not only unethical, but it wasn't good science. And I want to talk about that because I'm fairly certain a lot of people will be like, well, this is old news. It doesn't matter. It's just gaming drama. It doesn't matter, but it does. I was really hesitant about putting out this video because, again, it's not something that I typically do. It's more about the justice aspect, about the social science and the integrity of good science when it comes to doing these sorts of experiments, but also seeing content creator friends and acquaintances really impacted in very real and consequential ways. I couldn't not talk about it. So first and foremost, let's talk about the psychology of it. And that's the one that really bothered me. And so, with him saying that he has a PhD in Google, don't worry. You can play at that game. But also a point of interest, this is monogrammed, so this makes me a lot more legitimate. I'm just letting you know. It's actually my husband's. So let's talk about the social science stuff that he talked about with his video, specifically with confirmation bias. Based on what he was saying with his PhD from, Google, that he basically looked up various things from Wikipedia. And his definitions about confirmation bias and, authority bias were technically correct, But what he failed to understand was that the way he conducted his experiment was also confirmation bias. He decided to design his entire experiment in a way that would manipulate other people's feelings to see how far it went. Which, I don't think anyone needs to realize how unethical it is to manipulate people without consent. What bothered me about his whole design of the social experiment was that as a person conducting an experiment, there's a guideline and a template of how to have the best way of conducting an experiment without, one, causing harm to the people that you are experimenting on, and two, not muddying up the variables and all of the information you're getting because of your beliefs or, quite frankly, your presence in the experiment itself. There are a lot of social experiments out there that are, quite frankly, low stakes and low harm. One of my favorites when I was in school was the elevator experiment, where you would walk in and then you would turn and face the wrong way of an elevator. Most of us are inherently trained that when you're in an elevator, we face forward towards the door. And with the psychology of like the herd mentality, if you have a certain number of people doing something different, the herd is most likely going to follow suit because it's, what the majority is doing. And that sort of thing is more like, it's fun, it's silly, it's not dangerous. But this sort of thing, with the rise of digital psychology, for example, that we are still learning about the impacts of how digital spaces impact mental health, how it impacts our perceptions of the world and of people, it is something that we do need to take very seriously, not just from an education perspective, but from a humanity perspective. But Artsy, it's just gaming. It doesn't really matter. Well, Antonio, I'm going to tell you why that's not correct. Also say hi to Antonio. My biggest argument to that argument is the fact that gaming culture has been mainstream since the 90s. For those who don't know, Wood and I are actually similar in age. I think I'm about a year older than he is. So I'm fairly certain, based on his channel and his image and his persona, that gaming has been a large part of his life for, all of his life. And we can't just say, oh, because it's online, it doesn't matter. Oh, because it's gaming, it doesn't matter. Especially in the age where more and more people are using gaming for a whole wide variety of reasons. As I said, for like mental health, for livelihoods, for what I do on YouTube, for, you know, creations. Like, that doesn't cut it as an argument anymore. And this is where we talk about how words matter, you know, the difference between leaks and rumors. A big deal and high stakes are not the same thing. It doesn't have to be high stakes for it to be a big deal. What I do care about is that someone ran with a social experiment without really any understanding of the guidelines about what social psychology is about and how to protect not only himself, but other people. That is what I care about, because harm happened. Because now people have to respond. They've had to make videos. People have had to put out fires and try to regain and retain some of their own integrity and honesty on their own channels. People have had to spend time and energy fixing this lie because their spheres of influence are just as important and special as Wood's on BeatEmUps's. That is a big deal. And what was so striking for me is he even touched upon this in his video.
Oh boy, I feel my heart racing looking at this. To start with, I want to say I'm sorry to everybody that had to read this. It just consumed their time for no reason. I really am sorry. I'm doing it for a good reason, I thought.
He was seeing the harm that he was causing. He was literally like going, oh no, this is not great. And he kept teetering back and forth with realizing that, oh, this is actually a problem, but it's actually proving my point, but it's actually a problem. But, you know, it's actually like, oh, it's really interesting. And you know, interesting things can also cause damage and harm Wood. I don't know how I cannot tell people this. Like, there are things that I wonder about that I'm not just going to put out into the world because I thought of it. You know, that's just, you don't do that. The level of deflection that I saw was so astounding to me because, again, he was trying to like figure out how there's this difference between how human nature works, but also realizing that his clout caused this in the first place. Which leads me to my next point. What makes good science? And what did Wood do that was bad science? Good science is not starting a rumor for funsies. We don't start rumors just to see how it spreads, okay? Don't do that. And quite frankly, that's not called being like a social scientist, that's called being a dick, quite frankly. Science is also not about proving points, because science is not aiming to prove anything. And it's not a word, but I was talking with my husband about this, but basically science is the process of rigorous disproval. You were striving to disprove things in order to find the truth. Whenever you set up an experiment, you're not setting it up with a belief that you think is true, which is what effectively Wood did. That's where the confirmation bias comes in, by the way, Basti. I'm just letting you know. For a good scientific experiment, it has to stand the test of time by rigorous tests and eliminations that could potentially disprove your hypothesis. And once you eliminate all the things that you can verify as untrue, what you're left with is basically the truth until other evidence comes to light. So it's always going to be a working conversation. There is no actual like final truth in science because we're learning things all the time. And the sheer shocker about this social experiment is that there are so many psychologists that are in the rise of the digital age. Specifically, Dr. Rachel Cohort, who I interviewed on Gamers Gab last year. Oh my gosh, it's been so long. But basically, there are people who have a background in digital psychology and understanding the behavioral effects of various things. And the fact that Wood didn't think or consider to incorporate an actual psychologist, a person that could help him define the social experiment with resources, actual resources that would give him an interesting answer instead of just proving his point. It's like, it's mind-boggling. What were you doing with your PhD in Google, Wood? Why didn't you just like search on the internet and see what people have already been doing when it comes to understanding viral content online, which has been around, by the way, for over a decade, just letting you know. It just feels like this continuous argument that he wants to prove his point that, you know, leaks are bad and that, you know, he was doing this to protect other people, which anyway. But again, let's talk about social experiments, right? Like, does the fake Nintendo Direct actually have merit?
Now it's just escalating.
At first, when I started this experiment, I was worried. I thought, oh, I've tainted this. How did I not realize that of course my leak was going to go viral because it's me. This isn't some random anonymous person leaking something on 4chan somewhere. This is Wood from BeatEmUps's leaking it on his podcast. Of course people are gonna believe me.
Again, it's still mind-boggling that with all of his resources and all of his money and all of his influence, that he could have created a really profound social experiment that fell within the guidelines of ethics and, giving him something that he could produce with the cinematic quality that he did for his social experiment that quite frankly flopped. And I know that a lot of psychology students and professors will tell you that institutions and universities are desperate for any other information that is outside using students consensually, willingly, but the point still stands that he could have done something so much different and so much better. I'm so surprised that with his, his whiteboard and his, lab coat and his safety goggles, which, he's actually wearing and I'm not, but the very fact that he didn't discover or consider the ethics when it comes to social sciences, which is an integral part of what I learned and what I did out on the field, is so damaging. And I'm just going to kind of list this right now because I know that my unique sphere of understanding social science is very different than other people. But basically, ethics is a big part of social science and all about not causing harm. That is a big thing that in conflict resolution that we are constantly checking, who stands to benefit from a specific conclusion, what do I gain or benefit from, leaning towards a certain way? Am I impartial? Is impartiality even a thing? Can there be a bipartisan agreement? Will there be violence if I do it a certain way? There are so many things that you have to consider as a social scientist when it comes to understanding behavioral psychology and also working with people who are really truly impacted by the things that you do. With all of his PhD in Google, he didn't understand that there is a literal code of ethics from the Belmont Report. The Belmont Report, and I'm just reading this, so you can probably Google it and you'll find what I'm talking about. But the Belmont Report was written by the National Commission for the Protection of Human Subjects of Biomedical and Behavioral Research. And considering that he was looking to understand behavioral psychology with his social experiment, his experiment falls into these guidelines and requirements. The commission, created as a result of the National Research Act of 1974, was charged with identifying the basic ethical principles that should underlie the conduct of biomedical and behavioral research involving human subjects and developing guidelines to assure that such research is conducted in accordance with those principles. And those principles were respect for persons, protecting the autonomy of all people and treating them with courtesy and respect, and allowing for informed consent. I don't think there was consent in this. Do you? Researchers must be truthful with no conduct of deception. Beneficence. The philosophy of do no harm while maximizing benefits for the research project and minimizing risks of the research subjects. And I know that in gaming leaks that there is a shred of doubt and that you shouldn't really hold much weight to a leak. But the fact of the matter is we had a trustworthy source tell other trustworthy source that something was happening. And that impacts not only their livelihoods and their reputations, but our perceptions of what is true and what's safe. And finally, justice, ensuring reasonable, non-exploitative, and well-considered procedures are administered fairly, the fair distribution of costs and benefits to potential research participants and equally. I think the only person that benefited from the social experiment was Wood, because he has this video that has over 100 and something thousand views. And he put people on display to prove a point. That's what I took from that video.
There was one problem. I am not an industry insider. I don't have any leaks. I am just a YouTuber.
But we are in the rise where influencers carry a similar weight to literal politicians and legislators. I mean, that is something, again, that I'm going to be talking about in just a bit. But if any influencer tells you that they shouldn't be believed or they shouldn't be listened to, then they don't deserve to have a platform. Full stop. because the one thing that really gets to me with his whole authority bias is that he created himself to be a trustworthy, friendly, safe authority figure in the gaming space. And doing something one time out of left field is so emotionally jarring. I don't think he understands the damage that he has done. So again, let's talk about nuance, right? I'm not here to like tar and feather the man. I'm not here to put his head on a pike. I'm not here calling for him to remove his channel. I'm here to talk about this as a learning moment, and the fact that he is so flipping lucky that this is as low stakes as it could be, but still being a big deal for him to learn and grow and for other people to learn and grow. The fact of the matter is we are entering into a world of unmonitored and unmoderated deepfake AI technology where we can't really determine what is true based on our own eyeballs. And we are seeing that in real time where governments are prioritizing AI over actual people. And we're also seeing that in the rise, and again, I'm not so insulated that I can't talk about politics because politics impact us whether we like it or not, that we are having once trustworthy news sources appeasing to, quite frankly, fascism. The issue that I'm having specifically with influencers is that they will hide behind their persona and say that they are not responsible for the influence that they wield. And I will say to Wood's credit, he is not obligated to manage or moderate or control what people do. But he needs to truly understand that as an influencer, that he does have a special power. I find it really important to hold influencers accountable in the same way that we hold politicians and legislators and actors accountable. Content creators like Spanky Valentine, who also known as Swoop, who does a lot of documentaries where it's not drama, it's dangerous, as well as Hannah Alonso, who talks about influencer insanity and talks about the effects of consumerism and all of that. And the fact that I don't know what happens when influencers reach a certain amount of numbers and clout, but they tend to forget that even though it's just a business for them, they're part of somebody's everyday life. So when someone says, oh, he's just a random YouTuber, it doesn't matter. I need you to put this into perspective, friends, because being just a YouTuber doesn't cut it when you have more subscribers than 82 countries in the world have as populations. And because of that, with the more reach globally than, politicians, their words have power. They change culture. They change perceptions. We hold them up onto this pedestal of what is good or what is bad. So he's not just some random YouTuber. He's a person that people believe in. I'm done being a scientist for a minute. Also, I'm so sorry. My camera is just like blurring in and out. I don't know why. But aside from the bad psychology, the one thing that really bothered me was the apology tour. The purpose of an apology tour, friends, isn't to make yourself feel better. It's to make reparations for those you've wronged. And publicizing the apology is so, quite frankly, it's shitty behavior. Because, okay, let's think about the cozy gaming community, specifically Animal Crossing. We've had our drama with Animal Crossing. We have content creators who thrive in creating drama, fictional drama, by the way, in Animal Crossing, like this from Angry Coconut or Amanda from the Amanda Files. But at the end of the day, underneath that drama is a level of kindness and creating a safe space and allowing for people to learn and grow and have a good time. Like that is basically what I think Animal Crossing is and just the cozy gaming space in general. And so when he did the Discord phone call with Ben over at Crossing Channel, the literal gall. And I'm not speaking for Ben, okay? Because first and foremost, Ben is a delight and he can stand up for himself. He is an adult. He can fight his own battles. But I don't understand what Wood was thinking. What on earth is Ben going to do other than graciously accept his crappy apology? Because he really can't do anything else. Is he just going to like hang up on him and just say, no, F you, I'm done? You can't do that because then all the blame is placed upon Ben then for being, a crappy person for not accepting the apology. Again, not speaking for Ben, but I don't know if a public apology that's going to be used for a video that features your deception that wasn't even a good intention. It's going to be put on blast. And the social pressure to accept your apology is more profound than accepting or understanding the apology itself. I was watching the breakdown of like all of this drama, specifically from Pat and Zach in Nintendo and Switchforce, and their personas online. And I'm not saying that they are fake, that they pretend to be something that they're not, but they have a specific brand to uphold, where they are upbeat, where they are positive, where they are about community building and improving and building that community. And while I could definitely tell that they were upset, I don't think would understand that their brands depend on that. Not only that, but the trust and integrity of their community. And so he put these people's integrity as content creators of news on blast because of a social experiment. And at the end of the day, I understand, I think in the far reaches of this idea that he had, like what he was trying to do. I do. I mean, I have a background in this. I find behavioral psychology very interesting. And one of the things that I've been having to sit with is the realization that I'm not going to be like Wood or like Pat or like Zach or like Raven or anybody who is a large YouTuber, because I don't have that mentality. I'm not a persona, and two, YouTube isn't my livelihood. I don't think Wood understood that trust is integral to making a living on YouTube. That's the whole point of your channel, right? You are news for Nintendo. You're featuring things that people trust and believe and celebrate. And that is why I'm taking this seriously, friends. It's nothing to do with leaks or rumors. It's the fact that social science was used unethically and, quite frankly, cruelly. He manipulated people for views. Full stop. I know, again, from the whole high stakes versus big deal, but I want to ask you, how is this any different from, IRL bloggers who are, putting fake guns in people's faces to see their reactions? How is that any different from an April Fool's joke that announces a fake pregnancy or someone fakes their death? And with influencers being on the rise as being driving forces for culture, values, and change, we need to hold them accountable for that. It doesn't matter that it's just gaming. That's part of everyday life. And he's very lucky that he punched down on a community that strives for kindness and nuance and, seeing the good side in everybody. Because if I was a different channel featuring things like this, I would be responding very differently. I know that this is terribly edited. I know that I rambled and all of that, but the thing that I want you to take from this, a lot of us think that, to err is to human, right? But also to trust and to believe and to reach out and to build community. And I believe that if we are going to make it out of whatever dystopian digital age that we are finding ourselves in, that we create policies for truth, that we create policies for critical thinking, that we highlight the importance of citing sources and actually following, good science and integrity. Because again, there's so many different ways that Wood could have done this, but quite frankly, this was the sensationalist, quick sort of thing that kind of backfired in his face. So again, treat this as a learning experience. Treat things both with cynicism and curiosity. Be excited. Think of what the possibilities are, but don't depend your entire life on what's not actually real. So I don't know how to end this. This is really awkward, but I hope that at the end of the day that you're being kind to yourself and being kind to others and making art and playing games and encouraging others to do the same. And if you're ever interested in doing social experiments, actually talk to an actual psychologist before doing so. Be ethical, friends. See you later.